Thank you, guys. Okay, so we are here. I've got you guys for 2 hours. All right, we are going to kick off our planning efforts. But before we do that, let's find out who is in the virtual room here today. So we're going to do a round robin, and I'll call people out because there's quite a few of us on the board here. If you can give me what your name is, what commission you are on, task force or a coalition, or what community you represent. And then I want to know from you guys, like, one thing that you're excited about as we embark upon this planning process. And then one thing that you guys are concerned about, whether that is accessibility, as we are trying to figure out in real time right now, whether it is timing. If there's any concerns, if you don't have a concern, please don't make one up. But if you do, we want to know at the very front end so that we can address those concerns and mitigate those if at all possible. So with that, I will start with Jennifer Frischman. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Frischman. I'm with Aging Disability Services. And one thing I'm excited about, I think this is a really diverse group of people. And so I'm really excited to be working with all of you. And concerns, I don't know yet.
Okay, that's fair enough. I appreciate that. Well, thanks, Jennifer. I am now going to pitch it over to Charles.
Good morning, everybody. Charles or Chuck Duarte. I am the Nevada Public Policy Director for the Alzheimer's Association. And in my capacity here, I'm representing members of the Task Force on Alzheimer's Disease, which I co-chair, or vice chair, excuse me. And I also chair the Legislative Subcommittee of the Commission on Aging. I think, what I'm excited about is the opportunity to kind of lay a new framework out going forward that hopefully will influence department budgets and other services and programs. What am I concerned about? It's access to services, particularly in-home services.
Perfect. Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. We will move now to Cindy.
Good morning.
Audio now unmuted.
I was struggling to get on. So thank you for this opportunity. My name is Cindy Swanson. I am a resident of Boulder City, Nevada, which to my surprise is a rural community. I didn't realize that. I am blind. My husband and I have 3 sons. Our middle son has Down syndrome. He's 35 years old. We just moved here 2 years ago from Illinois. So we were quite involved in a lot of disability activities. In fact, Tony Records was Illinois' monitor for quite some time. I'm excited about this happening.
The HHSI Commission has joined the meeting.
The positions I represent is I am on the Commission Serving Persons with Disabilities. I am part of the Nevada Governor's Council on Disabilities, part of the Policy Committee, and I am on a subcommittee for SILC for integrated employment. I also just got approved to be on the Clark County Citizens Advisory Committee on Community Development. So there will be somebody with a disability on that group. And the things that I'm excited about is that we're doing this, and hopefully this will move the state forward. Things I'm concerned about is previous Olmstead plans did not, that I could see, have a timeline or concrete goals and objectives and accountability. And I'm hoping that this group of Nevadans has the strength to say this is what we are going to empower the state with. I hope I've answered the questions on the getting to know you list. Thank you so much.
You certainly did. Thank you, Cindy. We appreciate your contribution.
ADSD.
Okay, let's move then. Diane.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Diane Thorkelson, and I, just like Cindy, will be wearing several different hats as part of this group. I am the chair of the Commission for Services for Persons with Disabilities. I'm the parent of a child with a neurodevelopmental disability. I'm only going to be able to say child for like 6 more months, then she'll be 18. I am also the assistant director of the Nevada Center for Excellence in Disabilities, the NCED, which is part of the College of Education at UNR. So technically I am here representing the NCED, but I will also, and Cindy is the official rep from the CSPD, but I will be doing both. I am also excited about this. It was the CSPD about a year ago at this point that started asking ADSD, like, what is the status of our the state's Olmstead plan? And by asking those questions, Cheyenne and all of her colleagues jumped right on it. And here we sit today. I was also part of the team that did some of the initial data collection that we will review today. So I'm excited that we are moving forward. I have 2 primary concerns. The first is that I really want to ensure that we have equitable representation from people with disabilities on this group and not just professionals. And also my second concern is that Olmstead should be a statewide initiative. And I think heretofore it's been department or division specific. And I'm hoping that we can think of this beyond aging and disabilities and think about it as a statewide response to the Olmstead decision.
Thank you, Diane. I appreciate that. Okay, how about Julie?
Julie Weisman, I'm the chair of the statewide independent living council. I'm excited to be involved in the planning stages of Olmstead. I moved here from California 2 years ago and was very disappointed and disgusted actually in the lack of service for people with disabilities. And I'm excited to be in a position where I could use this experience to push the state into the 21st century. And my concern is that we're gonna do all this work and use all this energy and time, and it's gonna have our report is gonna just sit on a shelf somewhere and never get fully implemented.
Julie, thank you so much for that. I share that concern, and it's one that we always take a look at our firm. How can we make a plan a living document? And when we get through the development of the plan, my hope is that we can set up a framework so that you guys can track your efforts and be accountable to Nevadans across the state.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Julie. You might have some really great insights given the fact that you came from a different state and only have been here for a couple of years. So I am so grateful that you have decided to invest your energy with us in this planning process.
And it's not just California, it's from Berkeley.
Oh,
So I grew up with, so I keep college with Edward and Judy Hewitt. Still there.
well, thank you, Julie. It sounds like you have multiple perspectives to share with us, so I appreciate that. Marika, I saw you put your hand up a little bit. Do you have an update for us?
I'm so sorry. We are working to resolve. We're like trading back hosting duties to get through this. So Lisa, I had to make you the host. Can you make me the host one more time, please?
I can.
My apologies.
No problem. If I make you a co-host, will that work?
No, can you actually do the actual host
Yep.
capabilities? Thank you.
Okay, you are good to go. Okay. Let's move to Cheyenne.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the planning chief with ADSD, and I am just excited that we are here today, kicking off this Olmstead plan. That's one thing I'm excited about. My one concern I have is that I think it's probably similar to a lot of the concerns that have been shared already, but I want to make sure that this plan is not only a plan that is a tool used by ADSD, but by our advocacy groups and for us in Nevada to make some real change, I guess. So.
Well, thank you, Cheyenne. Okay, how about Miss Dorothy Edwards?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dorothy Edwards. I'm the Washoe Regional Behavioral Health Coordinator. I work for Human Services Agency as well, so I have sort of two roles here. I'm selfishly excited about what I'm going to learn and how I can take this information and help impact change and be a change agent. And my concerns are probably no different than those that have been expressed, so I won't repeat myself or others, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Dorothy. Okay, how about Jennifer Richards? Oh, you're on mute, Jennifer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Richards. I'm a white woman in an orange sweater with red hair. I serve as the governor's appointee to the Office of Attorney for the Rights of Older Persons and Persons with Disabilities. So I usually shorten that to Chief Rights Attorney for the state. And as a lawyer, I'm just excited to support this team and listen and just help move us forward. And one concern I have is just making sure that we stay true to the Olmstead decision and what that means as a living plan for the state.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. How about Miss Megan Wickland?
Hi, I'm Megan Wickland. I'm with the Aging and Disability Services Division. I'm the Developmental Services Quality Assurance Manager. I'm excited that we are here kicking off this meeting to develop our plan. And just one concern I have is that whatever we develop be a meaningful plan that can easily be implemented. So that's what I would like to see. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. How about Kimberly Palma Ortega?
Good morning, everyone. I know that you guys were having some script issues, so I had also just chimed in and typed in a short response of what I was going to say. My name is Kimberly Palma Ortega. Many of you guys I've worked with across the board from very beginning of starting here all the way to where we're currently at. I am a staff member as a public liaison for the Nevada Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities. I oversee the emergency management portion, as well as the access and functional needs, and their community health worker. One of my things that I'm excited about is helping build a stronger bridge, especially with the diversity, as Jennifer had mentioned, of everybody on here. And because I do have a small knowledge base of a little bit of everyone, I know we can probably definitely get this plan up and running. A concern I have is just making sure that individuals across the board statewide know about what this plan is and where we're taking it, and to make sure that information is just shared throughout the state, and that we finally get the ability to actually make sure that people are knowledgeable about that information as well.
Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, I think that we have gotten through almost everybody. I have Sean.
So Sean is working with me to resolve the closed captioning issue.
Okay, perfect. And then we do have somebody who's assisting us with our closed captioning, and that is Becky. Correct? Okay, I just want to make sure to acknowledge her. And then I have my team members. And so I just want to kind of let you guys know who my team members are and the team that is going to be guiding this process for you. So my name is Lisa Watson, and I'm a client services manager at Social Entrepreneurs. We've been around for, gosh, almost 25 years now, huh, Kel? And we have worked with the state on a number of different projects that really kind of intersect with this one. We have worked on the integration plan when ADSD combined with early intervention. We worked on the integrated employment plan, the SOX strategic plan, the strategic plan for deaf and hard of hearing, the autism spectrum disorder strategic plan, just to name a few. And so we are bringing all of that information and knowledge to the table. Now, having said that, we are, as you can see just today, learning as we go in terms of making sure that everything that we produce as a component of this planning process is accessible and available to everybody. So we welcome any instruction or redirection and input about how we could do things in a more accessible fashion as we move forward. I want to introduce my team members. So I am the project lead, and Kelly Marshall. Kelly, would you just like to provide a brief introduction?
Hi, Kelly Marshall. I'm going to mimic the approach and just describe myself. So I'm an older white female with blonde hair and a green scarf, multicolored scarf. I'm just honored to be part of this planning process, which I see as so important. I was one of the project leads on the previous Olmstead plan, and I'm currently working on the DHHS Division of Public and Behavioral Health Community Integration Plan, which is not being described as an Olmstead plan per se. And I just wanted to elevate what Diane said about kind of a statewide plan for Olmstead, and let you know that when this happened, when we did this work previously, ADSD took the lead. They helped frame out a strategic framework. Then DPBH did a specific plan for persons with serious mental illness or severe mental illness or serious emotional disturbances. So addressing both children and adults, they elevated the strategic framework that ADSD had developed. It then was adopted by all of DHHS, but is not a statewide plan beyond DHHS. I don't know the steps that we need to take to see if that is feasible, other than starting with DHHS to say, can there be an integration of these two plans, given that one is specifically on focused on community integration and the other is focused more broadly on Olmstead. What I would say is an opportunity that I'm excited about is for the ADSD plan to once again kind of raise the bar and set an approach that could then be broadly adopted through advocacy efforts across the state. I will say that, you know, the person who I think oversees this piece is Dr. Stephanie Woodard, who is in the director's office. So just a point to clarify, you know, it may be incremental that we can adopt a plan for all of DHHS, integrating those pieces. When we go to other departments, that is where it goes outside the purview and would actually elevate to the governor's level to make that determination. So some of that may be outside of our control, but I wanted to acknowledge what I heard and provide some context related to that, if that is helpful.
Thank you, Kel. That was helpful. And I will say it's getting a little bit ahead of our agenda, but we did try to frame out a data collection process that would help us understand what all of the needs are, recognizing that the state can't fulfill every gap in care, so that we're hopeful that this plan does actually serve both the state, but also community providers in understanding how to be responsive to our target population. Okay, and then you guys have heard of Marika, but Marika, do you want to do a really brief introduction about who you are and what your role is?
Yes, and I'm going to just keep it brief because I'm furiously chatting away here trying to resolve this issue. So yes, my name is Marika Barron. I'm a client services associate with SEI. I'm super excited to be here because I think this work is so important. And so I'm really excited to accompany you all on this journey and support how I can. And I don't have any concerns right now. I'm just really excited. And I guess my current concern is, how do I get this closed captioning to work so that this meeting is fully accessible? That's it for me for now. I'm gonna get back to it.
Thanks, Ms. Marika. And last but certainly not least, our newest addition at SEI is Isabel Meza. Isabel, would you like to come off mute and just introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Isabel Meza. I am getting my master's in social work, so I am a master's social work level intern for Social Entrepreneurs Inc. And I am also assisting on another project with SEI with a behavioral health community integration strategic plan. I have a background working in behavioral health and have been a case manager for a few years, so I know specifically some of the complications that I've had with discharge planning and people with disability and aging concerns. And I look forward to this plan and seeing how I can use my background to bring further advocacy to this issue as well. So thank you for, letting me be a part of this. I look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Isabel. Okay, well, now we know everybody who's virtually in the room, so we're going to go ahead and get into what is it that we are trying to accomplish today specifically. So you guys are the steering committee because you guys are steering this process. So one of the things that I want to do at the very front end, and that's why it's the first thing on our agenda, is to really go through like what approach we have planned from start to finish to get us to a new Olmstead plan for the state of Nevada. I want to talk about timing as well as what you can expect from us and what we will in turn expect from you. I want to reiterate that this is your plan and your planning process. We're just kind of the work engine behind it. So if there's anything that you guys have questions about or you feel like we haven't covered, this is your opportunity to adjust how we actually go through this process. So that's the first thing that we're going to do is I want to provide you guys with that information and then receive any modifications to our planned approach before we end our time together today. Second thing, and this is part of how SEI approaches all of our work, we always start with the end in mind, right? So we put together what is the framework for the Olmstead plan. And we're hopeful that you guys can take a look at that and then tell us, does this fit your expectations? And if not, give us that feedback now. We'll incorporate those changes and bring it back to you at our second steering committee meeting. And then the last part, which will really set us off to start doing the hard work, is really taking a look at our data collection efforts and our approach. So I want to ask you guys, I want to talk to you about like what we have planned, and then ask you guys a couple of questions that will help guide how we collect that data and look at that data moving forward. Okay. So before I get into our planned approach, does anybody have any questions or anything that you think that we should add to the agenda that won't be covered under those three kind of overarching objectives that I just described? I see, Charles, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I did. Actually got it to work too. So yes, I do have a question for the record. Charles Duarte, older Native Hawaiian man with a goatee and a little hat and a sweater on today. But I had a question regarding the scope of the report and the plan. In reviewing the documents previously, there's quite a focus obviously on persons with disabilities. But throughout the document, the abbreviation PWD is used to include that group. But as a part of the document, there's also definitions around frail elders, vulnerable older people. And so I guess my question is, what is the scope or the intended scope of the plan? Is it to include those individuals who may not have a designated disability, but who are frail elderly? Or is it specific to those older individuals who have a disability? So I guess understanding the framework and the context is important for me because of who I represent as a member of the Task Force on Alzheimer's Disease, a group that is unfortunately, like individuals with mental illness, inappropriately having their rights taken away by being subject to locked facilities. And so, there are a lot of concerns on the task force around that. So that's my question, is how inclusive is this, or can we define the group that's going to be affected by the Olmstead plan a little more clearly?
So I don't have an answer. I am actually going to pitch that to ADSD to provide the context for you, Charles. But that's a great question, and one that I think that we need to figure out at the very front end. What I can say is that the mental illness component, I don't think we're going to be doing the deep dive into the behavioral health component because there is that separate planning process going on. Having said that, I think we can integrate into the document a reference that's a document that is aligned with our own, but just addresses that particularly.
And to clarify, individuals with cognitive impairment who may have dementia are not included in any integration plan associated with mental illness, because organic brain disease, which is dementia is one form of it, is not defined as a mental illness. So this group is, there's 50,000 Nevadans right now living with dementia. So this group is not included in that plan. And so I'm wondering if I was asked to, represent this group on the committee. So I'm wondering if you folks view that as a group to be included in the report, those individuals with cognitive impairment and specifically dementia.
So can I ask that question be addressed? And I don't know if Jennifer might have insight or Cheyenne. in regards, because I know that we are looking at community integration, and a huge part of our data collection efforts focuses on existing services. And so can you answer Chuck's question?
This is Jennifer Frischman. And then I'll pass the baton over to Jennifer Richards as well. But we really would like this plan to be inclusive for everyone. So that would include those that are aging and that have dementia, because I think really what we'd like to get out of this is, you know, what services are available in the community to keep people in their homes for as long as possible, as independent as possible, recognizing that Olmstead is specific, you know, to people with disabilities, but we really do want this to be inclusive of everyone. And Jennifer Richards, I'll turn it over to you as well.
Thank you. So I would refer the group to the ADA definition of disability, which is under section 12102. I can put it in the chat. But for those purposes, a disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities of such an individual. And under that same section, the rules of construction direct us that disability in this chapter shall be construed in favor of very broad coverage of individuals to the maximum extent. So my suggestion would be, as long as we're casting a wide net, we're in compliance with the ADA definition. And typically individuals under, for example, the waiver services, they do have a major limit of one or more life activities to qualify them for that service.
Does that answer your question, Chuck? The folks that you described, would they be covered under that ADA definition that was just offered?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer's, for the feedback. You know, somewhat. I think, you know, typically the individuals with dementia, seniors, and even those younger than 65 have not been included in any of these kinds of planning activities historically. And so I would be very pleased if they were, but that's, like I said, I'd like to make sure up front that it's going to be inclusive of that population, especially as, you know, we start talking about things like data collection and that type of work. I'd also like to be able to get back to the task force on Alzheimer's disease and let them know, you know, what the status is for the population that they're concerned about. So I guess I'm still a little quizzical about it. I'm not sure if we can get more clarity on it. You know, is it in or is it out, I guess is the question.
What I would like to do, Chuck, if you're open to it, I'm already thinking, because I'm the one who put together the template document, and I'm already thinking about what data I need to add to just that environmental scan. And so if I could work with you directly to make sure that I'm on the right track as we collect that data, and then you can tell me, like, you're missing this component, Lisa, then I will do my very best to be responsive to your request. Will that work?
Yeah, certainly. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, wonderful. That was a really great question. Are there any follow-ups?
Lisa, Diane has her hand raised.
Perfect. Diane, please.
I don't know if this will just perhaps add to Chuck's question or add to the confusion. This was a point of discussion at the very beginning of the NSAID's data collection process. Also, you know, how wide the net, does disability also include, you know, aging and elders? We didn't land on a particularly comfortable spot, I don't think. I think clearly it's still a question out there. Hopefully through this process, it may become a little more clear. But I just wanted to say that this is not the first time the question has been raised.
Yeah, I know. And you know, having worked in state government historically on Olmstead issues, the dementia population or for elders were never really considered part of the framework for Olmstead. So that's why I'm asking the question as well.
The other thing that I can do, Chuck, is I'll take a look at some of the other Olmstead plans around the nation and see if I can find any clues there as to whether other states have incorporated that population as well. And that may offer us up some insight about how we too can consider them as a part of the planning process. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? All right, let's do this. Okay, so 3 primary objectives of the project. So the first thing that we have to do is just understand what is our current reality. So what does the existing state system look like? And what are the needs of the populations that we're serving? And as Charles already demonstrated, there's a number of different populations who will be impacted by the Olmstead plan. So we're going to do our very best to collect the information that's specifically around community integration for each of those target populations to really get a grasp on where things stand right now. The second thing that we have to do is that we have to create a plan. And as many of you guys demonstrated in your opening dialogue, we have to create a plan that is specific, that is realistic, and that holds the state accountable for actually making progress. So we have framed out as a part of our approach and in the planning document itself, that kind of framework, which is a legislative mandate of Olmstead. And then the last thing that we want to do is we want to position the state for success. So we want to outline at the very front end, like, how often are we going to revisit this? How are we going to report on our progress? How are we going to review and see if the circumstances or the environment has changed so that we change with it? So those are the 3 things that we're seeking to accomplish in the development of your new Olmstead plan. So the project approach has 3 kind of what we consider phases, and this is going to be a comprehensive project. So it's going to take us the next 12 months to get through all of these things, but we want to be very intentional. We want to gather all of the information that's most critical, and we want to bring it to the stakeholders to get their input and then their feedback on the final draft plan. So the first phase is really us just getting organized. We have met with ADSD on a number of occasions to really identify what this steering committee and the composition of it should look like. And then we also started to collect some initial data. That's, Diane, why you kept on getting those prompts, right? Where we were just asking, we'd like to see that data. We've also collected some other just census-based data that will help us understand what the current reality looks like. The second phase of the project really is about assessing the current system and the needs of our target populations. And so we're doing that in a number of different ways, which we'll walk through a little bit more specifically later on in the agenda. But we're going to do key informant interviews with hopefully like system stakeholders, people who really understand the system, where it works, and where it doesn't necessarily meet the entire needs of our population. We're going to analyze all of the data that we collect through key informants. We have consumer workshops that we're going to be doing, again, to integrate the consumer voice throughout this process, right? We're going to collect the data on the system, the services that are available, and where the gaps exist, with the goal at the end of this second phase to really identify, like, what are the most critical needs for community integration, and how do we need to respond to that as a state as well as a whole system. And then the last component is putting it all together in a document that we then present to you guys in phases. So there's actually like 5 different meetings where you guys will gather, and I will be putting together the pieces of that plan as we go along. So we'll identify what are our goals, what are our objectives, who's the responsible entity for implementing these things. And after we have a complete document available, we will actually make it available for public input and feedback. We will summarize all of that feedback and then present it back to the steering committee before we finalize the document. So as I had mentioned, this is a 12-month planning process. So I'm just going to go through the next 12 months so that you guys have a really clear understanding of our sort of major milestones in putting this plan together. And this is where you guys have an opportunity to say, Lisa, you missed a step over here, or you didn't consider that over there. After we get through this sort of project approach, I'm going to be asking specific information around the data collection. So if those questions come up, I may parking lot that until we get to that agenda item, but I'm hopeful that going through month by month what the major activities will be, you guys will start to understand how the plan is going to come together during our time together. So in November, which we're almost wrapped up with November, we collected some of that basic data. I haven't put it into the template document yet because I first wanted to confirm with you guys that we were on the right track, but we have collected some of that initial data. I've looked at a number of different Olmstead plans throughout the nation to really wrap my arms around how other folks have approached this so that we can incorporate like the best practices of multiple states who've already done this many times in the last 20 years. We established the Olmstead Plan Template Report, which we're going to be reviewing today. And then we scheduled, planned, and we are facilitating both. We have a core team of ADSD staff folks who will be working behind the scenes to give us all of the info that we need to drive this process. And then we will be working with you guys to get all of our steering committee meetings hopefully scheduled for the remainder of this project so that you guys can mark it out on your calendar, you know what to expect, and we can stay on track in terms of our timing with this project. So then what does December look like for us? We're going to be gathering all of that additional data so that we can really understand what the current system looks like. We're hopeful that that initial data will provide us with some insight about what do we need to gather more information from consumers specifically, as well as our stakeholders. So after we get all of the data from the state, we have the UNR survey, we have some of the initial data about the landscape and our target populations. We will take a look at all of that, and then I will draft both the questions that we intend to ask from our key informants, as well as our the questions that we want to ask during our consumer workshops. I'll bring that back to you guys in the month of December for you guys to actually sign off on those questions to make sure that we are exploring the right areas in order for us to identify the most critical issues. So we will finalize our approach, our questions, and then we will schedule, plan, and facilitate our steering committee meeting. So we will have a steering committee meeting in December. I'm thinking either today or tomorrow at the latest, we will be sending out a doodle poll to you guys so that we can get that on the books, given the fact that December happens to be a really busy month. Okay, so in January, we are in full swing of our key informant interviews. And so we will be reaching out and doing up to 20 stakeholder key interviews. I'm going to ask you guys today to just start brainstorming about who within the system do we need to talk to take up some of those 20 people slots. And then we will also spend time both in the month of December and January coordinating the logistics for our consumer workshops. We have in our project approach the ability to do 8 consumer workshops. So I first need to know from you guys, like, where should we do it? And the second thing that I need to know from you guys is how do we encourage participation at these workshops? So we had in our original plan anticipated 2 in sort of Washoe County, Clark, or Washoe County, and then 2 in Las Vegas, and then 4 in the rural areas of the state. So I just needed some direction from you guys about where do those need to take place. And then in February, we will actually host those consumer workshops. So from a timing perspective, we're going January key informants, February consumer workshops with the goal, excuse me, of having a sort of comprehensive assets and gaps analysis to you guys for consideration in March of 2023. So we will take all of the information that we collected and add to it the stakeholder input, and then we will identify at least some initial areas where we see themes across those data sets that need to be addressed through our new Olmstead plan. So then in April, we really start then putting the guts of the plan together. After you guys have met and we've reviewed a summary of all of the data that we've collected, you guys have identified like, here are the most critical issues that we need to address in the Olmstead plan. We will do some initial research. What have other states done? And what are some best practices that we know work to address some of the critical issues that you guys have identified? We will do that so that we have something to give to you guys to react to or respond. It could be that everything that we come up with doesn't work for Nevada or has to be customized for Nevada. This is really where you guys are going to play an important role throughout, but I'm really reliant upon you guys to say that best practice may work, Lisa, but we need to make these tweaks over here for Nevada specifically. So we will do that research and we will bring it back to you guys. And then we start to craft what then becomes our goals and objectives for the state of Nevada. So then you can see here, every month we will have a steering committee and you can see that we will address a specific component of the plan. So in May, we've gotten through the asset and gaps analysis. We will use that then in May and June to really craft out those goals and objectives, strategies to implement throughout the state. In July, we will establish then what does that accountability framework look like? Who's going to be responsible for this? When should key milestones be met? And then also like how are we going to review and hold ourselves accountable for the plan? In August, we will then have completed the draft document. There's an executive summary that we'll put at the very front end of it. And then we will meet with you guys to finalize the draft with a goal then of making the document public and having us available to present the document. And we have virtual meetings on the books as a part of our approach to present the document and to receive any public feedback live in a virtual meeting or through another mechanism if people want to do it at their own leisure. We still have to finalize what that will look like, but our hope is that we provide people with multiple opportunities based on what their comfort level is to provide us with input on that final plan before we actually finalize it with you guys. So you can see that public input sessions occur in September. We'll summarize all of those public comments, and then we will come back, present that summary to you guys, and you guys will make the final decision about what needs to be changed in the draft document and what needs to stay as is. After we meet with you guys, we will finalize the document and then distribute it both to you as well as ADSD for implementation. Okay, before I move into roles and responsibilities, let me just stop and pause and ask, are there any questions about either the approach or the timeline that I just offered? Okay. Having seen none, seeing no hands raised, seeing nothing in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and then move on to the roles and responsibilities. So obviously we have lots of folks at the table, right? We think it's a good idea for us to be just super clear about what folks' roles and responsibilities are as a component of this project. So myself and social entrepreneurs, we will do all of the heavy lifting, right? We will conduct the key informant workshops, the key informant interviews, the consumer workshops. We will gather all of the data that we outline and determine today is necessary for us to understand the existing state structure and services that are available. We will prepare all of the materials for each of the meetings, and we will make sure that everything is accessible in the way that we did in preparation for today's meeting. We will present the Olmstead plan to the public. We will summarize the results, and we will make any modification that this steering committee directs us to do. We will also plan and manage the project. So if at any point in the process there's a delay, either things that are within or outside of our control, we will make sure to elevate that and inform both ADSD as well as you guys about what the implications of that is, so that everybody is on the same page with all of the information. So that's what our role is, social entrepreneurs. ADSD also plays a very specific role. Obviously, they are the ones that are behind this whole planning process. They have committed to making sure that we get all the information that we need to conduct this process. So a good example is that they are the ones that reached out to all of the existing commissions and councils to say, who would you like to have represented on this steering committee? We've also already asked them for the information about the programs and services that are impacted by the Olmstead plan. And then they will provide us with any information that emerges as a part of this process. They will help us arrange meeting spaces for the in-person workshops and activities because they have spaces and they know where the people are. So we're really relying upon ADSD for that sort of support. If there is any open meeting requirements and if there is accommodations that are specifically requested, we will ask ADSD to provide that kind of support. We will ask ADSD to provide us with a review of any of our major deliverables and specific instructions about what needs to be changed. And then they have also committed to making time, and we've determined on a monthly basis, we will meet with them to do that project management component that I talked about. So to really collectively make sure that we're staying on track and that things are going according to our approved project approach. Okay, and then last but not least, there's all of you guys. And you guys are really the stars of the show, right? So you guys are our steering committee. What we ask of you guys is, if at all possible, please attend all of our meetings, because we are making important decisions at every single gathering. So if you can't make it, please let us know as soon as possible. And then we will try to brainstorm with you about how we can either gather your input before the meeting and integrate it into our steering committee meeting, or after the fact, if at all possible, because we don't want to leave anyone behind. But we also recognize that real life happens. And so to the extent that we can keep the lines of communication open, that would be really important, so that we can make sure everybody's represented in this process and in the final document. We also ask that if at all possible, you guys take a look at the materials and then come prepared to either ask us questions in the meetings or reach out to us in between the meetings. We're trying to keep our steering committee meetings to working meetings and a manageable time frame. So if there's things that we can do in between the meetings and you want to reach out to us directly, we would appreciate that. So anytime that you guys have significant input, please reach out to us and we will be responsive to that. And then the last one is just reviewing all of the documents. And if there's things that we're not doing that we said we would, if there's things that you think ought to be incorporated that aren't, please let us know. That's what we really are relying upon you guys for. Okay, so that wraps up the roles and responsibilities. Before I go into some foundational decisions about our process, are there any questions about the roles and responsibilities that I outlined? No?
This is Jennifer Frischman. I just wanted to say one thing, and this is for everyone on the call. We want this process to be as transparent as possible. So, and that's one thing that ADSD talked to SEI about. And so please know that ADSD is not making any decisions without first consulting this group. So we're not trying to go behind anybody's back. We're trying to be as transparent as possible.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well said. Okay, so When thinking about this process, because we are serving so many different sort of constituent groups, and because we all have a different role to play, I thought it might be really useful for us to just at the very front end, come up with some shared agreements about what this process is going to look like so that it's not up for debate when there's friction between what somebody thought was going to happen and what actually did happen. And so I've crafted these as just a starting list. I'll go through each one of them and then offer you guys an opportunity to ask questions or modify it. And then at the end, if there's any shared agreements that we need to determine as a group that aren't covered under the bullets that I've offered, please open up the conversation and we can add to this. So let me just start with the first one, the agreements of how we're going to work together and make decisions. So we have structured all of our planning meetings to occur virtually. So I just wanted to put that out there at the very front end. The only things that we're going to be doing in person are the consumer workshops for obvious reasons. But we will, all of our planning meetings will be done virtually. The input that we receive at the back end from consumers on feedback about the final report will happen virtually. And then we will record all of our virtual meetings and let that serve as kind of the documentation of both our discussion as well as decisions that are being made. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about that? Okay. The second thing that I wanted to note is that meeting materials will be sent out no later than 5 days in advance of our meeting. All the meeting materials and the documents created as a component of this project will be remediated to ensure accessibility for all. We've also asked that ADSD secure the translators so that we can have that closed captioning available to us. But we want to make sure that this is accessible to everybody, not just the steering committee members who are present, but also anybody who may take interest in the work and the process can actually refer to any of our documents, our recordings in an accessible fashion for them. Any questions or concerns about that? Okay. The third one. The steering committee members are the only individuals who are empowered to take action on the Olmstead plan. Action will be taken during scheduled steering committee meetings. So you guys each are empowered, right, to come to the table and to take action. We understand though that you guys represent a larger constituency, and we expect that you guys will be taking your information back to those constituents and likely have some input for us based on your transferring that information and that knowledge. We encourage you guys to invite anybody into the process, but to make sure that this is manageable, fair, and equitable, we just wanted to clearly define that the decisions that are going to be made by this committee alone. So I just wanted to get sign off on that. Any questions about that? Okay. The fourth decision is that, you know, this is not a process that requires open meeting laws. So we won't be like having to post this in a public place, and we won't necessarily need a quorum because we don't have, you know, structured bylaws and things of that nature. But we did want to clarify that because we are on a timetable and we want to continue to move this process forward, that a quorum of the steering committee will not be necessary for us to proceed, that action will be taken on each agenda item by an affirmative vote of the majority of steering committee members who are present at that meeting. And so that's where it becomes super duper important for everybody to actually participate, because we want to make sure that your participation is represented through all of the decisions that are made as a component of this process. And then the last one that I've outlined here is that every member of this steering committee will be provided the opportunity to weigh in on decisions to be made and action to be taken, and that no individual should monopolize discussion time. Okay, so I'm going to stop and pause and ask for folks' feedback or reaction to at least the initial bullets around decision making. So having seen no questions, are there any additions that folks would like to propose in terms of shared agreements for how we're going to work together over the next year and make decisions? No? Okay. Then we can move on. Thank you, guys.
Lisa, I think we just wanted to welcome Marika back. And Marika, I don't know if you just want to like articulate specifically how folks could access the captioning that is occurring on the separate screen.
I sure can. So there is a link that we've dropped in the chat. If you don't have access to it, I can drop it again. It's will allow you to pull up a separate screen and see the live transcription occurring there. There's no clear reason why we are unable to access it in Zoom. So we will work to resolve that for future meetings. I don't know if it's helpful if I read the link itself or if dropping it in the Zoom is sufficient for folks.
Can you just do both, Marika? Let's cover our bases.
Absolutely. So it's going to be https://captions unlimited /1 capapp.com/event/ADSD. And I will
Marika, are those backslashes or forward slashes?
Oh, good. Oh, I think they're forward slashes. I'm sorry. Ha ha ha. My apologies there. Let's just try that again. One more time. It's going to be https:// thank you, Kelly. Captions unlimited /1 capapp.com/event/ADSD.
And I see you also put that in the chat. So thank you, Marika. I appreciate that.
And it is very helpful to have it up, and thank you to our captioner.
Okay, guys, so we've made it through our first meeting objective. The second one then now is to take a look at the Olmstead plan document and to make any adjustments necessary. So would you mind, either Isabel or Marika, putting the PDF version of this document into the chat? Everyone should have received the documents in advance of the meeting, but just in case you want to refer to it easily, we'll go ahead and put it in the chat. And if you take a look at the Olmstead plan document, I'm just going to walk through each of these sections and then offer you guys an opportunity to provide feedback. So we will open the document up with acknowledgements. We will acknowledge each one of you as steering committee members. We will acknowledge the state as being the driver of this process. We will also acknowledge all of the folks who contributed their time, energy, and perspective, either by way of stakeholder interviews or consumer workshops, as well as the folks who completed the survey that UNR established. So that's what we'll do at the very front end, just so folks understand all of the inputs that were a component of the process. Directly following the acknowledgements will be an executive summary. So that'll be like a 1 to 3 page, probably 3 page for this document, 3 page summary of kind of the objective of the plan, the process, a brief summary of the process, but then more specifically, the actual plan goals and objectives. That executive summary is meant to be used as a communication tool by the state as well as by each of you to really demonstrate what the plan represents for multiple stakeholders. So somebody doesn't need to necessarily complete the reading of the whole document. They can just pull out the executive summary and understand what it is that we're doing. And then we get into the major sections of the report itself. So the first section will really be about setting the stage for the reader. We will include, and we've already done this, so in the template that you guys received, you can see that very first page, we provide some background information for the reader, which outlines what the actual Olmstead legislation is and what this plan represents for the state of Nevada. So background about Olmstead, the purpose of the plan, and then we will outline, well, what was our methods and approach for completing this plan? Much of which we just went over. We'll just do it in a narrative fashion in the document itself. Then we go into kind of what is our strategic orientation. And this is like what everybody came to the table and agreed to make decisions through this particular lens. And so I think Kelly mentioned at the very front end, when we put the plan together last time, DHHS actually incorporated much of the sort of strategic framework and now are utilizing that throughout the entire division of DHHS. And so we're going to be presenting that to you guys and saying, is there anything specific that we need to call out for this plan, or does this DHHS framework kind of meet our needs? So we'll be laying that out in the document. It's one of our agenda items for the steering committee that'll come up in December, is actually that section of the plan. Once we understand kind of what is the lens that we're looking through as we make all of these decisions, then we will lay out what is our understanding of the current reality. And so that incorporates all of the sort of phase 1 and phase 2 data that I've described and that we'll talk about more specifically in the next agenda item. But we want to understand, what is the landscape of individuals in Nevada with a disability or who are aging or who have a disability. So we will outline that in terms of the information. We will also provide that sort of systems description. Here are the current services that are available that support community integration. Here's the number of people who are served. Here's the cost of those services. And then we will also summarize all of the additional data inputs that we have received to identify what those critical issues are. So you can see there will be that in the document, really to walk people through the same exact process that we're going through in putting the plan together. The next section is our actual plan, right? The next section really outlines the goals, objectives, and the timing of efforts. And then the last section wraps it all up by saying, here's what success looks like through key informant indicators. And then this is how we plan to evaluate our progress and update the plan. So with that, here are some of my questions for you guys. So here's where you guys get to make some of your first key decisions about the Olmstead plan. My first question is, are there any changes that you would suggest to the sections of the plan? And the second question is, does the look and feel kind of match what you guys would like to see for your Olmstead plan? Diane, I see you have raised your hand.
I say at this point in time, I don't have a lot of feedback. It seems to fit currently. That may change as we gather data and get more input. But right now, I am in approval of everything.
Thank you, Diane. Jennifer, I see you've raised your hand.
Thank you. So just a couple of things. First, it's not Olmstead legislation, so it's the Olmstead decision. It's not legislation. It's just a pet peeve of mine to refer to it as legislation. Regarding the look of the plan, I guess I have some technical questions. Right now, it's just the bones, so mostly in the appendix. There's a lot of state law references and definitions. I'm wondering how necessary most of those are, and if it would be more appropriate to refer to the federal definitions because those supersede the state law definitions. This is really based on a federal law. And I can send you those comments after with the track changes if that's easier.
Perfect.
And then just one other suggestion from my personal research. I did look at a couple other states. I personally really liked Nebraska's state plan and the way that they phrase their goals. For example, goal number 1 for Nebraska is Nebraskans with disabilities will have access to individualized community-based services and supports that meet their preferences. So they phrase their goals as action statements. I just really liked the way that they did that. So I just would offer that as something for the team to look at if that's something that interests anyone else. But I don't have any issues with the way that it's presented. It's just a preference of the team.
Got it. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
And if you send me the definitions, those federal definitions, what I'll do is I'll work through the core team to figure out if we should put it all in there or if we should do the federal and not the state. I lifted that actually from our old Olmstead plan. And so that's what was kind of vetted in the last process, but I think it'll be a good idea to just revisit that.
Oh, sorry, I do have one more thing on my notes. Yeah. For the definitions or the appendix section, will you be including a definition for integrated setting or will that be in the body of the material? Because that is a very critical part of defining what an integrated setting is. And there is a definition of sorts, both in the Department of Justice guidance, and I think in the decision itself.
I think we should actually probably put it in both locations, Jennifer. So if you have the one that you're referring to and you are able to shoot it to me, then I can integrate it into both components.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or concerns or suggestions about the document template? Yes, Chuck.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know where this would fit, but it would seem like there would need to be some acknowledgement with respect to the prior plan and the work that had gone on either to address issues brought up in that plan or areas where work has not really moved anything forward. So having an understanding of what was in the prior plan and the status of the work involved with that, I think might provide some context. And maybe that's something that goes into the introduction itself, but might help to provide a framework and context for this current plan.
So I love that. And we actually did briefly talk about this with ADSD during our initial core team meeting check. And so what we landed on is that we would offer like a broad overview of what has been accomplished over the last, at least specifically the last 5 years. And so we're hoping to have that in the next iteration of the plan. And then you guys can provide us with feedback about, is that enough? Would you like to see more? But we did have that conversation and plan to put some of that information into the doc. Oh, and I see your chat. Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that. Okay.
Lisa,
Well-
Julie has her hand raised.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see that, Cal. Julie.
Did you say unless somebody in the introduction you were gonna only talk about what was accomplished in the last plan? Because I think it's equally important to recognize what wasn't accomplished and how we could use that to shape this iteration.
So Lisa, I think what I'm hearing, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, is like the desire to really understand what was accomplished in the last plan? Is that correct?
Or what wasn't accomplished? What was and what wasn't?
I think it's equally important to look at what wasn't accomplished.
Okay.
And why. And if those things are still priorities for this group in shaping when we create this correct.
Yeah, so I think that that'll likely be a major part of our discussion during our December meeting. So let us gather from ADSD kind of what has occurred since the last plan was developed, put it into the document. I think that there will be a couple of things that come out of that. I think one of them is that it'll help us understand kind of areas that we need to explore currently through the key stakeholder interviews as well as the consumer workshops. But it might also offer us like a frame of what we need to do differently so that progress can be made moving forward. Because I think that there's an acknowledgement on the part of ADSD that they really want to see something different in the future. So there's not, I think that there is an acknowledgement that what is needed hasn't necessarily been delivered on since the last plan was developed. And so we will have a standalone discussion about that during our December steering committee meeting. And Diane, I see you put your hand up again.
Sorry, I think you just, I completely agree with Julie, and I think it will also be important for us to have some understanding as to why things were not accomplished. If anybody has any insight to that, or if there's data related to that, you know, looking at those barriers in order to craft a different, more effective plan this time around.
And Diane, I think some of that may be barriers and processes, right? So I'm not sure the data is going to tell us that as much as a depiction of processes or lack thereof.
Agreed.
But I'm already thinking of one of the questions we may ask the stakeholders is like, what were some of those barriers and what do you see needing to occur to remove those barriers moving forward? So,
yeah, what would it take? What would it take from a process perspective? Because sometimes, you know, that can get into all kinds of complexity. So people think, okay, we need to add this. And I mean, Chuck knows this better than anyone, having run Medicaid for a number of years. You know, it's not as simple as like saying, oh, we want this in our state plan, right? There's a legislative component if there's a federal match, right? There's a state plan amendment if needed. There's CMS's approval of that plan. I mean, there's a number of interrelated steps that could then at any point be the thing that causes the wheels to fall off.
Yes, Chuck.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if this has come up or whether you folks will be discussing this, but it would seem to me that understanding the change in the number of Nevadans who are at risk of institutionalization, whether that number has gone up, has stayed the same, or gone down since the last plan, is an important part of the planning process. Because I think it gets to, we could have been doing a whole bunch of widgets, producing a whole bunch of widgets, but if they have not been effective in reducing institutionalization or addressing people at risk of institutionalization, then it's for naught.
And so let me ask you this question, Chuck, because as I was contemplating this project and the approach, we can gather like the number of people who've been institutionalized over a certain period of time because we have that data. But the number of people who are at risk for it is a little bit harder to come by. Do you have any ideas about how we would gather that kind of information?
I could throw some stuff out there, but I'm not sure whether it's really going to address the question. For example, looking at the number of pre-admission screening and review examinations have been done over the years and the results of those. So those are the screenings that need to occur for an individual who's going to be placed in either, I think, a waiver program or a nursing home. The paths are you try to rule out, causes of things like intellectual disabilities. And so that kind of data might be available and might provide at least an idea of how the numbers are changing. I think the relative number of people who meet criteria for things like the Medicaid home and community-based programs or some of the state-funded programs might be helpful as well. So, those might be a way of at least, providing some surrogate information that helps, provide a little more context around whether or not efforts have been successful. And I believe that the Medicaid agency, I don't know if they still do this, but they used to have a program called Facility Oversight and Community Integration Services. And I think they still do that in coordination with ADSD, but that may be another source of the focus reports, maybe another source of information. Those are folks that are capable of being discharged from nursing homes.
I saw Jennifer take herself off mute, and I think she's going to raise what I was going to, so I'm going to lower my hand. Jennifer, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to confirm what Chuck said, that yes, Medicaid still has the focus program, and they also work with Money Follows the Person, or MFP. So, and they do work closely with us as well. So we can try and get some data.
Jennifer, can you just give us kind of the reality of the looming legislative session? And if we were to do any data polls, is there a period of time like we should get requests in by this time, or we're not going to get anything for 4.5 months? Or is that not the reality because of what you just described? Like, what's the political reality?
Well, are you talking for this session?
Yes, like just the competing priorities of resources. Is that an issue or not?
Well, I think if we're going to do any legislative asks, it's kind of too late for that unless you.
No, I don't mean a legislative ask.
Oh.
I meant a request for data that may be trumped by legislative act.
Okay. Sorry, I was not tracking.
Okay, I think I probably didn't express that very articulately. So thank you.
We can pull the data.
You can pull the data. Okay, that's great.
Yes.
So Lisa, I just wanted to make sure that there was process and that things would not come to a screeching halt, which in some cases with other divisions, they would.
No, we'll also work through the Office of Data Analytics at the Director's Office, and they pull a lot of our data. So we're good.
And I think, Jennifer, you're the one that's gathering some of the initial data for me right now as we speak.
Not me personally, but we've got folks working on it. Yes.
Got it. Okay. So I think that we are done with the template. I think that I understand some of the data components. I will integrate that into the document as soon as we wrap so that it's a reminder to me that we need to address this and request it if we don't get it. Any final questions before I move into the data gathering component? We're right about on time, so we've got about 30 minutes left. This is the last agenda item for us to get through. I see a couple of chats came in.
Yeah, just a note, Diane had to log off, so any questions we might have had for her, we will not be able to pose today.
Okay. Okay, well, so this is our plan for the data gathering component. So I'm going to walk through kind of what the template describes, but then I'm going to ask you guys some targeted questions to help us kind of have a final approach to our data collection efforts. So the first area of our kind of environmental scan or asset and gaps analysis really is about the number of individuals in Nevada who would be impacted by this plan. And so I crafted this before hearing Chuck's input earlier during our meeting. So I think that there's already some adjustments that need to be made here. But what I have so far is the total percent of the state's population that has a disability, the number of adults and children with a disability in each county, and the number of adults and children with a specific kind of disability in each county. And so the hope here would be that we understand kind of what the state perspective is, and then how our target populations fall throughout the state. The question that I have for you guys is this the kind of information that offers the best kind of perspective of our target populations? I think I've already heard that we need to be a little bit more expansive, use that federal definition of disability, and then include information. This is kind of what my initial thoughts were, having heard Chuck's perspective, is provide some information about the aging population and some information about like the trends that we're seeing, whether that population is increasing or decreasing, because that will inevitably impact who's served in the future. But is there anything else? Yes, Chuck.
You know, I think you just said it, Lisa, and that is trend data might be important and valuable. So, you know, rather than just a snapshot of the total number of the state's population with a disability, how has that changed? I mean, is there now available census data from the last decennial census that can be used, or are there sources that the department has that can estimate trends in some of these numbers? That might be valuable as well.
Yeah, we'll take a look at, so I'll definitely take a look at the trend data in terms of the aging population. In terms of the folks who have a designated disability, we're limited in that we have to stick with the Census Bureau framework. And I don't, like the data that I initially pulled, this is just getting into the weeds at the moment, is the ACS like projection data. So it's not actuals, but that's the best that we have. So I have to go back and look. I'm actually gonna pitch this one to you, Miss Isabel, because you found the initial data set, but can you take a look and see if the data around disability information specifically, if we have actuals in the past to create that trend, or if we only have projections? So we'll see what the data is that's available and then put it in the doc, and that'll be something that we review in December.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's BREFS data or BRFSS data as well that might be helpful in this regard. I don't know. And then the other suggestion I might have is whether or not the disability determination unit over at the other department, employment, whether that data would be helpful or whether it's available.
Cheyenne, do you have any idea about that?
Sorry, I can't find my unmute. Oh, I am unmuted, sorry. We have quite a bit of data that we get from various sources for the elders count. But I'm almost thinking, because I know right now we have the census data and there's some limitations with that. And if we think about the ADA definition of disability, I'm wondering if the census data is broad enough, because the ADA definition would include, for instance, people with a cognitive impairment or people living with dementia. And so for this kind of section, I wonder if it is more that trend data and that comparison of like our home and community-based service spending versus our institutionalization spending, going on the previous conversation, if that sort of shows a picture a little differently than just the census data, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, if it's specific to dementia, I can give you some information on Nevada specific sources on individuals living with dementia and projected trends over the next 5 to 10 years. So I've got some of that stuff too. So I'm happy to work with you afterwards.
Wonderful. I'll follow up with you directly then, Chuck, on that. Yes, Jennifer?
Thanks. And I think just some of the concerns that I have with the census data, and we talked about this previously, is that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6 different categories. And like we talked about, I might have mobility issues, which causes me to have some self-care issues, which causes me to have ambulatory, and so those people are counted in each one of those. It's not singular. It's not, I fit into one category. So I think while this is good data, it kind of skews it a little bit and doesn't give you a true representation. But as Chuck said, we can also work with Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation, specifically vocational rehab, to get some of their numbers, just to do a comparison as well.
Yeah, thank you. That would be helpful, Jennifer. I think that we have to get to a place of like the tipping point, right? Like we know that we're not going to have perfect data, but we have to make sure that we have enough data to make like data-driven decisions. And so I'll be really interested in hearing your guys' feedback as we send out the next iteration of the plan document to see like, are we going in the right direction and do we have enough? And if we don't have enough, we'll go back out and see if there's other data available. I just think that it's probably fair to manage expectations that we won't have a complete data set because it just doesn't exist, but hopefully we have enough information that it helps us really understand what the current environment is and then what the needs of this population is moving forward. So a couple of takeaways in terms of just the landscape is that we need to take a look at some different data sets. Specifically, the employment and training folks might give us some disability determination data. We'll take a look at some trend data, and then we'll also take a look at those focus reports and some of the data that we've already described throughout the doc. Okay. So second area of data collection really has to do with the services and supports that are currently available through the state system. And so here's an area where, again, I need to like provide a qualification because we know that the state isn't the only provider of services, right? But this is a state-sponsored plan. And so what we're intending to gather is a description of those state-sponsored services that have an Olmstead impact, as well as the number of people who are being served, and then the cost of services. I think what I just also heard Cheyenne talk about is to take a look at the fiscal data for community-based services versus institutionalized setting services, so that we can see if there's any trend there in an increase of investment in one over another over time. And then the question that I have for you guys in regards to the state services, first off, is this what you expected to see? But then, like, the second thing is, when it comes to the state-sponsored services, does anybody have an idea of what's most important for us to understand about those state services? So I'll give you an example that came up in our core team meeting. It was around the waiver services that the state currently has. And I think that I'm not speaking out of turn when I say ADS said, you know, we want to understand not only like what the current services look like, but we also want to see, like, are there state-sponsored opportunities that we may not be taking advantage of, i.e. additional waivers that we should consider. So that's just an example of like a service, a state service kind of framework and what we would be looking at in terms of data gathering. And if you guys want to, in the document itself, in the template document, it actually outlines all of the services that have an Olmstead implication. And so that's our initial list of what we will be gathering to describe the state system. So I encourage you guys to take a look at that and give us feedback if you think that there's something missing. And Chuck, I see your hand.
Sorry to keep chiming in here, but I think the cost of services can be very deceiving for a number of reasons. And, you know, for example, while the state dollar investment, you know, it could be flat, but because of increased federal support that we've been getting over the years, it may look like, you know, a tremendous growth in services. But what's that is masking is really what's the state's investment in these programs, right? And so looking at things from an individual person-centered perspective is important. How many people have we served? How many more people are we serving? As opposed to how much have we spent? And, you know, again, that opens a can of worms. I mean, you know, what about rate increases and decreases in the Medicaid program, the largest payer of long-term care services? How does that affect those trend lines? And so to avoid all of that, you might want to look at, you know, the number of people served as opposed to the cost of services being provided.
And would your proposal be, Chuck, that we do one instead of the other, or both?
You can do both, but I think that the cost of services come with a lot of caveats, and there's a lot of information that you don't see on the surface of those kinds of cost trends, expenditure trends, I should say. And so, you know, without a detailed explanation of what's going on with expenditures, it's hard to say whether or not that bears any relationship to the number of people being helped.
I know, Cheyenne, that when you sent me some of the initial data, it was that there was like cost per person analysis, but off the top of your head, do you know if that's available for all of the programs that we intend to outline in the doc?
Cheyenne, for the record, I can't say for certain that it's available off the top of my head for all of the programs. But we can take note of that and see what we can do.
Okay. So that noted, Chuck, and where we're able to, we will, and where we're not, we can have a discussion as to why we can't. And then determine whether we need to put some sort of caveat into the document around it. Any other questions or input around like the state service system and the data we intend to collect around that? Okay, then I'm going to move into our asset and gaps. So this is really where we are gathering information from our key informants and our consumer workshops to understand the availability of services and supports, the barriers to community integration, the quality of care, collaboration across systems, workforce sufficiency, and then accountability efforts. So these are things that we have either identified in other complementary state plans or things that have been identified in other Olmstead plans that we seek to gather information on and include in our asset and gaps analysis. And so, as I had mentioned before, we'll use the UNR survey, and I have a question for you guys about that. We will use the stakeholder interviews to really understand systems, and then we'll use the consumer workshops to really understand at a deeper level the issues that consumers are facing. The question that I have for you, and I didn't actually put it in the PowerPoint, but I'll verbalize it, is, are these the right areas, or do you would you want us to explore other areas in that gaps analysis? So that's the first question. And then I have questions that are specific to the data collection itself. So the UNR survey, I'm hopeful that you guys might have taken a look at it. We got it the same day that we actually forwarded it to you guys. And so if you haven't, I completely understand. But if you guys have, and there's anything that sort of stands out as a critical area that we need to explore more, I would like to hear from you guys about that. And then I also want to gather some information from you guys about who should we consider interviewing for those key stakeholder interviews. And then if you have ideas about where we should host our consumer workshops. As you might recall, 2 in Reno, or 2 in the Washoe County area, 2 in the Vegas area, and then 4 in the rurals. And so where should those other 4 areas be? I don't need like a specific location, like we're going to do it at this, senior resource center or family resource center, but rather more so what areas like Elko, or White Pine, or wherever else you guys think we need to go out to really gather the information from consumers. So let's start with that first overarching question, which is, does these look like the right areas to explore through those mechanisms that I described? Is there anything missing? Hey, Chuck. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. And sorry to ask so many questions, but what does accountability mean?
So that's really like tracking your efforts on progress made.
Okay.
So how have we or have we not really held ourselves accountable to implementing the plan?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Lisa, you see Cindy's hand is raised?
I don't, but I don't have everybody on.
The audio now unmuted.
Cindy.
Yes. I listened to the documents yesterday, and I don't know that this is an appropriate place to say this, but where there's something that I guess needs to be looked into is the regional centers. They're not all created equally, and the case coordination people are not created equally. And since in my understanding, that's basically the gatekeeper that everybody goes through in order to get or understand services, and communication being the important thing, I've understood that anecdotally as an extremely weak link. And if that's the threshold everybody has to step over, I think that's something that needs to be pointed out. And since I have the microphone, I am going to ask, I got in a little bit late, a couple of minutes after we started. Is there representation on this steering committee from either the school system or vocational rehabilitation commissions? Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. So to wrap up your first point around the regional centers, maybe how we can address that is asking a specific question through the key stakeholder interviews and or the consumer workshop. So when we draft those questions and look at them during our December meeting, if there's another way you would like for us to phrase it, I would welcome that input from you. And in regards to the schools or the Voc Rehab representation, we don't have anyone from either of those entities. I'll pitch this over to Cheyenne and let you make the call about how we proceed with that.
Thank you, Cheyenne, for the record. Yeah, this is one of the challenges that we have with this not being a statewide Nevada plan. So what we've talked about is setting goals and objectives that it's almost like a two-part process, right? We have goals and objectives that ADSD can take ownership of and facilitate, but also recognizing that there's activities that need to be taken on by other entities outside of ADSD, and being able to then utilize those opportunities that we identify in our collaborations when we're working across systems, or when advocacy groups are trying to educate people about changes that are needed. So I see it like kind of a two-layer process there. And hopefully we get to a point with this being a living, working document that we can make it a Nevada statewide plan in the future. We're just not at that point today, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm wondering though, if the intention is that we would represent or elevate issues that are needed, but not necessarily under the purview of the state, we may want to just do specific outreach to like folks within the school system or to Voc Rehab about our process and encourage them to like provide us with input along the way.
And Lisa, Cindy has her hand raised again.
Yes.
Again, I raised my hand.
Cindy, we love that. Please.
I honor what Cheyenne is saying, but I'm still kind of concerned because we're still working in this vacuum, and I think that if we're starting out from the threshold, I think those people, those organizations need to be at least part of the process. And the reason I say that is because we're going to get people who are 18 or 22 coming out, and they're going to be clueless about what's going on. They're going to be going to Voc Rehab, and some of them are going to be saying, I understand this and that, and Voc Rehab is going to be a little bit clueless too. And I'm more empowered to say this than ever because I'm thinking about, and some of you folks will know this, the employment first process in this state. And I just learned today that there really isn't an employment first plan. So when we go back to whatever 2011 or 2014 or 15, when we were first starting that, how well set was that table? Was everybody at the table? Because right now it's kind of been a drop thing. And I, as a consumer, as an advocate, as a professional, as a person with a disability and a child with a disability, I think we're missing a golden opportunity to have those voices at the table. And that's as clear as they can be. And I've learned a lot from Chuck listening right now, and I'm grateful to all of you people, but I think we're missing an opportunity to not have them. And there is going to be an attitude toward this process if those people are not somehow included in this. Thank you.
So Cindy, let me do this. We will have a meeting. We're actually trying to get it on the books with the core team from ADSD, and let us brainstorm around this issue, and I will personally reach back out to you with whatever is determined.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Chuck?
I hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to first address one of Cindy's questions because it came up in the context of elders, seniors that want to work. And that is, are there work first programs available in Nevada? And one of them that I recall is something called the Health Improvement for Work Advancement or Ticket to Work program. Now that never took off, but the idea was people with disabilities would be allowed to keep their job and avoid counting income against their Medicaid eligibility. And so they received these federal tickets, and I don't know how many of those are still available or whether that still is an operating program. Last time I looked, there were 3 recipients statewide on it. And so, there have been attempts, but really they haven't helped a lot of people. So, so I think that's an important question is are there, work-related programs that help people stay on the job or gain employment as a priority, and that's probably through DETR as well. But I wanted to address the workforce sufficiency and quality of care issue because I think I don't know if it was Cindy who brought it up, might have been, or maybe Diane, or maybe Cindy, that we've got providers out there, and on the books, they say that they're Medicaid providers, they're available. There are hundreds of organizations that provide licensed residential group facility care, but really relatively few take people with specific types of conditions that require a higher level of quality and training. So, for example, individuals with intellectual disabilities, individuals with dementia, individuals with multiple chronic medical conditions, the resources are scarce. And even in-home work like personal attendance services, that's been reported on going as far back as I think 2019 by the Gwynn Institute in Las Vegas, that how poor Nevada is faring with regard to access to those services. And it's not just a Medicaid problem, it's a statewide problem. So I'm kind of rambling here, but my suggestion would be, if we're looking at quality of care, what has the department done in order to specifically improve the quality of care? So, for example, with these residential facilities for groups, we know that there was a huge, media coverage of just gross failures of those facilities to serve people with mental health problems. Has that improved? Has the licensing bureau, the organization within DHHS that licenses these facilities and different service organizations, have they implemented, based off of advocate feedback, have they implemented quality measures that they hold these organizations accountable to? Has the Medicaid program done that? So I think there are specific things that can be highlighted with regard to improving quality of care, as well as availability of services. And I think some of that has to come from the agencies. So quality of care, for example, are there licensing standards for the types of individuals who serve people in these residential facilities? Are training standards. With regard to workforce or access to services, what do the wait lists look like? And some of this will have to come from consumer interviews, I think. Because like I said, on the surface, on paper, you'll see, hundreds of organizations serving the Medicaid population. But when you talk to somebody out of Elko or Pahrump, there ain't nobody.
Right.
There's nobody there to take care of an individual who might need in-home care. So I think some of that's going to have to come in terms of workforce sufficiency and availability is going to have to come from consumer interviews. But like I said, in terms of quality, are there things that the state has done to improve quality specifically in some of these service areas?
So
policies and regulations would be, the specific things you'd want to look at.
So I think that that's great. And I think that as we take a look at it, it'll become really important for you guys to kind of look at what programs we're actually looking to collect information from to make sure that we've got all of them on the list that you think we need to collect that data from. And we can incorporate that component of that request, like what are your CQI activities and how have you held yourself accountable to improving quality, within your programs. Okay, we are 1 minute over and we are almost done. What I would offer to you guys is I'm going to give you guys homework, and your homework is going to be to actually think about folks who you think are critical key stakeholders from a systems perspective that we should be interviewing as a component of our data collection. So I will follow up with a request for that information be sent to us directly. And that way we can vet that list and present it to the whole steering committee during our December our December steering committee meeting. Another part of that email will be a request for you guys to complete a doodle poll to get at least the December meeting on the books. I would like to ask you guys, if you think about the locations for the consumer workshops, do you guys have any ideas for those 4 rural areas? I think Elko has to be one of them because it's a larger sort of rural population in the state. Where else should we plan on going for consumer workshops?
Lisa, I think we had a discussion previously. This is Kelly, by the way. Potentially about Nye County.
Okay.
Just because of the disproportionate number of persons who are identified as having a disability. But I would leave that up to the steering committee to rule in or rule out. Elko and Winnemucca tend to be, 2 areas that are rural and populated.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing Nye County, Elko, Winnemucca.
I mean, I'm just throwing out ideas. I have 0 power or voting rights on this group.
Okay. Given the time, I think I just want to ask you guys to be thoughtful about that. We do want to finalize what those locations are going to be during our December meeting so that we can start doing the outreach needed to get folks to participate in those. I think given the time, we're going to wrap this up. I just want to let you guys kind of know what's coming up next. So we will be collecting the data that we've talked about today from Jennifer and her team over at ADSD. We will begin to populate the document. I'm going to reach out to you, Chuck, specifically for some data elements that we talked about to test those with you. We will, after we have at least that initial data collection reviewed, then we will craft the questions that we will pose to both the stakeholders as well as the consumers during the consumer workshops and bring that back to you guys for the December meeting. So follow-up email in which I will ask you guys to complete a doodle poll to get the December meeting on the books. And then I'm going to outline the homework that I've given you, which is to think about who within the state system should we think about interviewing, who's not on the steering committee, but who will offer some valuable perspective. This is where I'm thinking that maybe we could reach out to like the Voc Rehab folks to conduct at least one key informant interview to address Cindy's concern and perhaps even the school districts. or folks who are working with adolescent aged youth. And if you guys have any additional feedback about our accessibility, the way that we're approaching the project, or just our process, please feel free to reach out to me directly. You all should have my email. We want to make sure that this is a plan that works for everybody and that the process is transparent and accessible. With that, I would just say thank you each for your time and energy today, and I look forward to the next year working together to put together a plan.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Alt F4, leave meeting button to activate, press enter. Megan Wigland has left the meeting. Alt F4, leave meeting button to activate, press space bar.
Okay.
It's a little rough.
Yeah. The thing is, Kel, is like, I asked ADSD about the whole, like, what do you want to do about what you haven't done with the ADSD plan? And I don't know if you have any suggestions, but at some point, like, I can't be their shield for that.
No, I think we have to bring it back to the core team and ask them specifically, like we are not to be the voice of this. You need to direct us. That's part of what literally identified as their responsibility.
Yeah.
I would also say for the next meeting, prior to the meeting, we need to do a dress rehearsal.
For the accessibility stuff, or
Yes.
for what?
No, because we have to get that figured out.
Well, the hard part was that I asked Cheyenne, like, on the Friday after our core team meeting. So we met on Thursday. On Friday, I asked her about the closed captioner, and she's like, we've got that handled. But then, like, we didn't get the contact information to even do that stuff. And she sent out an email like on Wednesday before our holiday break, like, oh, we've got that handled, but that was it.
Yeah, so there's clearly an interface with Zoom that has to be managed, and it may be that we need to do it as a webinar instead of a meeting. Like, I was basically sending Marika links and for Marika. So the problem with it is it's not going to look bad on ADSD's part that they didn't respond till Wednesday.
No, I know.
Because people just like think, well, we didn't have it together. Now, I think for the first meeting, like, they saw we were trying to figure it out. We don't understand why it didn't work. And there was a viable option, which was to have Becky, basically doing that transcript, which I thought she did an amazing job. Like, I only stepped in once because I thought she didn't hear like a word right when she heard conflict instead of accomplishment. But I was trying to like kind of track and listen at the same time, which is why I kept doing this.
Yeah, and I can't, like, I didn't have it.
No, there's no way you can, Lisa.
Right.
No way.
But maybe we need to have somebody, like, maybe that needs to be one person's role, is just to, like, maybe that, Isabel, would be your role because you're kind of my accessibility queen, right? Is to like track and work with her on the back end and have that be separate from the person who takes notes.
Well, the thing is, if it were showing at the bottom, it's very easy to then see and say, oh, just correction, that's accomplishment, not conflict, right? What we don't know is who is seeing it, like who clicked on the link. And so having that separate screen open is like, that was a good plan B. But ideally what we would all do is just enable closed captioning so that you would see it in real time being typed into the screen below. So I mean, I definitely think it's something somebody on our team can do. Okay. No problem. And Becky's like the best. She is really the best.
Okay, well, that's good.
But when we have the next meeting scheduled, I think we need to do a dress rehearsal specifically on that to make sure we've got all the connections, we're setting up the Zoom right. There was like reference to, you have to go get this URL, put that in, link it.
And do you think that because I wasn't managing the back end of that, Kel, like, do you think that we need to do that dress rehearsal with Becky or just, okay, with Becky? All right, so.
Or with Sean. I don't even know who Sean is.
I don't either.
But whoever, I mean, I would ask Marika to follow up on that because she was, you know, troubleshooting in real time. So it's either Becky or it's Sean or it's both of them, but we have to have that sorted out, right, for the next meeting. So the only way I can think to do that is to do a dress rehearsal where we're using the same link.
Right.
So that's typically what we've done before, right? Is we use that link and then it's all set up. We know it's all set up and we're all good.
Okay, so I'll put that, I'll do an internal meeting, Isabel, for me, you and Marika to think about what that looks like. The other part that concerns me, Kel, is the incorporation of like the frail and elderly with dementia and finding numbers that may not exist to help
So
describe that.
Chuck needs to find those numbers and ADSD needs to make the determination about whether that's in or not. It's not our job to decide that, right?
But this is what I'm worried about, Kel, is having worked with Cheyenne and just my current experience with her on this project is there's a lot of deferrals. And so like.
Copy Jennifer.
Okay.
Copy both Jennifers.
Well, maybe I'll just include all of the core team. Like maybe I'll just, as a practice, just communicate with all the core team members about these.
I would do that until you're told not to.
And then do you think it's appropriate, Kel, for me to like structure with the core team, like when issues like steering committee members come up, I'm going to defer to ADSD because I don't like, and who should I defer to? Because I did it to Cheyenne because she's my project lead, but
right.
I could come up with a number of like just potential risks based on this meeting and then offer
data, money, definitions, right? And it's different people.
Right. So, all right. So
it got real fast.
Right.
Which is good.
Yeah. I mean,
better in meeting 1 than meeting 11.
Yeah. And that's fine. I just wish ADSD would, like, in the way that Jennifer said, like, we're going to defer to this group. They also need to own, like, let's be real, folks. Like, we created an ADSD integration plan in 2016 and we did nothing with it. Like, it would have been really great for somebody from ADSD to just stand up and say, we fell down on this and we're committed to not doing that again, instead of having me kind of do the shuck and jive, which is what I felt like I was doing.
Well, and it may be that Dina, like, that's something that could be brought up at the core team. And maybe it's not the next meeting, maybe it's a meeting after. Sorry, I was starting, so I had to count an RX bar. Dina is the person who needs to fall on that sword.
Yeah.
So, like, one, if I were Dina, I would want a heads up.
So how should I like manage that? Do I bring that up with the core team and have them then go to Dina directly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you send something in advance to say, I think we really need to talk through A, B, C. You know, is there a way to have Dina at this meeting, or can you just let me know who's going to be the point person to communicate that to her? Because our counsel to you would be to say publicly what you said privately to us, which is, we didn't make the progress we needed to. That's part of why we want this plan to look different and be different.
Mhm.
And we accept responsibility for that.
Okay. And then do you think, Kel, like, I was wondering when there was not a whole lot of like feedback, you know, when I would ask pointed questions, I was like, oh, maybe we need to do breakout rooms, but I'm worried about the accessibility issue if we do breakout rooms. So do you have any ideas about that?
There was a note on breakout rooms and accessibility, but I think it would require that you had multiple captioners, right? So now it may be that there's a way, actually, I don't know. I don't think I know enough to be dangerous on this one, except in my ignorance. So I'll just shut up about it. But I did not think, I thought for our first meeting, Lisa, that participation was good. So you had Cindy, you had Diane, you had Chuck, and you had
Jennifer, the attorney.
Jennifer. That was good. They're a little bit, they're not cohesive, and that they're all advocates in different ways for different things. I think there are some ground rules that we could establish, like, and just have a slide at the beginning of each meeting to say, here's the ground rules, you know, we'll call on you if we're not hearing anything, because we want full participation. But there were as many ADSD staff as there were participants. And the one thing I'm worried about is it sounds to me like they want to expand who's on the steering committee.
Well, that's what Cindy's request. Yeah. I don't know who you would get from the school systems. Like, I was trying to think about, like, would it be from somebody like the state office of ed? Does
It would
Nevada
be
have a
the
state
Nevada
office?
Department of Education. They probably have a person specifically focused on disabilities. But the other thing is, did we ever get a person from the Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities?
Let me see.
Because you know, that used to be Sherry Manning.
Kimberly Palma Ortega is the representative.
Okay, she did not participate, probably because it was last minute.
No, she was on.
Oh, was she on? Oh, yeah, she was on.
Mhm.
Okay, so I mean, I almost feel like having like a private one-on-one with her to say, like, your office was really instrumental in the last plan and then providing leadership. You know, Sherry did that whole convening on integrated employment, which came up.
Yeah, I almost said, well, there is an integrated employment plan, but I didn't want to put my foot
Right,
in
but
my
it's
mouth.
specifically for intellectual and developmental disabilities, which is a narrower scope
Right.
than what Chuck was talking about, which he was talking about, you know, right to work. And honestly, he was posturing a little bit there, Lisa, because he was bringing up something from his time at Medicaid, which was like over a decade ago.
Okay.
That was a judgmental statement. So I will just,
No.
that was a judgmental statement. That was my read of what was going on. And I've known Chuck a long time. I've been in these kinds of planning meetings with Chuck many times.
Yeah, no, I think that he might have been the person who wrote like the very first response to the Olmstead plan, like 15 years ago. Which means I need to go back and reread that because it may illuminate some of his ideas, because he was very pointed and it was very well put together. Yeah. Anyways.
It's such an important project.
I know.
It is so important. And I thought minus the glitches and even including the glitches, like it was well done. Like,
well, we did what we could, right? Like with the information that we had. So I don't feel bad about our process, other than the technology snafus at the front end. I should have been more thoughtful, but this is the first time I'm doing this. So lesson learned. Won't happen again.
The GSR on the PowerPoint needs to include like looking at things like the questions and who, not how.
I know.
I don't know if you caught that.
Just the one I did. Okay, I think that's all I got for now. I got to process. I got to think about.
Okay. The other thing that I'm worried about is the data piece, and so I think we have a data repository, right? This is where we've gotten data from.
We have hardly gotten any data, Cal. Yeah. Like, well, I have it in there, like the data for the needs assessment, but part of the problem is that I just got the services, like the services that we're going to be collecting data on from them, legitimately, like right before Thanksgiving as well. Like put it into the document the day I sent it out.
And I thought you made that point really well, and without pointing fingers at all. Like, I thought that was very nicely handled. So I think we're just going to have to say, like, we need some grace over the holidays, but then I'm very worried about legislative session, because a couple of the core team members, they're going to be gone.
Right, and we need all that data really during the next month for it to be meaningful and for it to drive the other efforts. So one of the things I can do with a core team is during our next meeting, not only get those sign-offs on agreements about who's gonna fall on their sword for any particular issue, but also like, when can we expect this data?
I think that, and then also, like, what is their approach going to be to accountability to the previous plan?
Yeah.
Like, so that's not so much like the falling on the sword as like, are they going to give you actual numbers served?
They've given me some numbers served, and it's abysmal.
Yeah.
Abysmal.
So, I mean, that may be the thing in terms of this falling on the sword, is to say, look, this meeting where we go through the data, that may be a meeting that Dina wants to be at.
Yeah.
To kind of manage expectations and also acknowledge. And remember, it's not her plan. She wasn't even in the picture when that plan was developed. It was Jane Gruner and it was Julie Kachiver who were really driving and had the vision, and the steering committee followed them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, there's no smoking gun, right? There's no warm body to point to say, there it is, because they're all gone.
Yeah. I'll continue to reiterate though, like, I heard them say, like, this needs to be a plan for all of Nevada, but I'll tell you that Cheyenne has been very, very particular about, these are only we're only going to give you information on programs that have an Olmstead impact. And so
that's why I said what I said, and I saw Diane nodding, like that she understood. Like, you can't wave a magic wand and make this, like, you're going to make the Department of Corrections adopt this plan,
right,
and integrate like discharge planning for community integration into the prisons. Good luck.
Right.
Like, it would be a major lift to just get the 5 divisions within the department. And that's one thing I just wanted to say, is just make a chart for yourself. DHHS is the department, and then there are divisions under.
I always get those two mixed up.
I know. So you kept saying division, the division of DHHS, which demotes it.
Which that doesn't make sense because of the English language, right? Like, the English language would say that division has a higher placement than department, but I understand, Kel, but I'm just saying the whole English language thing, which I'm not an expert in by far. QUU. That's all I got to say.
QUEUE. And then just snap your finger and go like, whatever.
DHHS department and the ADSD division. Gotcha. Okay. All right, team. Well, I'm gonna go eat and rest after that one before my next meeting, my next task. But I'll follow up, Isabel, with a internal. I think we need to have an internal meeting to plan next steps.
Okay,
All
sounds
right.
good.
Thank you, guys.
Reach out if I can help in any way.
I will, Kel. I will.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.